My colleague, my friend, was leaking sensitive data and stealing my work. Then he framed me for it. Here's how my cybersecurity expertise and digital forensics uncovered his betrayal and saved my career. That I've always believed that the best defense is a good offense, or at least a solid understanding of systems. My job as a cybersecurity specialist is literally built on that principle. Anticipate threats, patch vulnerabilities, and stay one step ahead. I'm 30 years old, and I've spent the last decade honing that mindset, turning abstract digital vulnerabilities into tangible risks and solutions. In my world, trust is earned, verified, and backed up by multiple layers of security. So it's ironic and deeply unsettling that the biggest threat I faced didn't come from some shadowy hacking group or an exploited zero-day vulnerability. It came from someone I trusted, someone I considered a friend, right there in the trenches with me at Sterling Financial. Sterling is a huge, sprawling beast of a company. It's the kind of place where you can get lost in the sheer scale of operations, where every network segment and data flow is a potential attack vector. My role is to identify and neutralize those threats before they materialize. I'm usually neck-deep in firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and threat intelligence feeds, speaking a language of packets, protocols, and exploits. It's a solitary, analytical world, and I thrive in it. Then there's Mike. We work on the same team, ostensibly partners in securing Sterling's digital assets. Mike's different from me. Where I'm quiet, analytical, and methodical, Mike's the charismatic one. He's the guy who remembers everyone's birthday, organizes the office pool for the Super Bowl, and makes everyone laugh in the break room. He's a whiz at networking protocols, but his real talent, I now realize, was people. He could charm his way into any conversation, build rapport instantly, and always seemed to know just what to say. He was my work friend, the guy I'd grab lunch with, the one who'd offer a casual, "Need a hand with that, Alex?" For the first 2 years we worked together, Mike was my wingman. We'd collaborate on security audits, bounce ideas off each other for threat mitigation strategies, and cover for each other during late nights. He was genuinely interested in my work, always asking detailed questions about my projects, about the vulnerabilities I was uncovering. "You're like a digital detective, man," he'd say, eyes wide with admiration. "Seriously, how do you even find these things?" He'd often offer to help streamline my process, suggesting ways to automate certain checks or simplify access to files. I chalked it up to his genuine enthusiasm and a desire to be more involved. But slowly, subtly, little things started to feel off. It began with minor inconveniences. My login credentials would sometimes be reset when I hadn't requested it, requiring me to go through the IT help desk. Mike would offer to help, always saying, "Let me just handle it. It'll be faster." Then, access permissions on certain sensitive project folders would inexplicably change, requiring my manager's intervention to restore. Mike always seemed to be nearby, offering theories about system glitches or outdated user profiles. Mike also had a knack for asking questions that felt a little too probing. "So, Alex, about that new client data migration project. How secure is that transfer protocol, really? Are you sure no one can piggyback on that connection? Or, I noticed you're running a new analysis tool. Is it fully compliant with our company's monitoring software? I could give you a quick rundown on the approved versions, just to be safe." He'd always frame it as being helpful, wanting to ensure I wasn't inadvertently breaking any rules. Then there were the times he'd ask me to send him files directly via email, bypassing the internal secure transfer system. "The corporate portal is so slow today, man," he'd say. "Just shoot it over to my personal Gmail. I'll forward it internally from there. Way faster." I'd hesitated at first, given our company's strict policies on data handling. But he'd laugh it off. "Don't worry, my personal account is locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Just my own little security bubble." I never thought much of it, really. Mike was my friend. He was helpful, enthusiastic, always willing to lend a hand. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? We were a team, fighting the same digital battles. The real unease started when our team's main project, a high-stakes security audit of our flagship trading platform, hit a major snag. We discovered a significant vulnerability, a backdoor that could have allowed unauthorized access to millions of client records. It was a serious breach, and my fingerprints were all over the logs that identified the discovery and the initial analysis. I'd spent days on it, meticulously tracing the exploit's path. Suddenly, the narrative in the department began to shift. Mike started dropping hints in conversations with our manager and other senior staff. Alex is really going above and beyond on the trading platform audit, he'd say, his tone laced with something that sounded almost like concern. But he's been pretty isolated lately, working crazy hours. I just hope he's not taking on too much, you know? I've offered to help him document everything properly, but he's been very protective of his methods. Then, during a team meeting where we were supposed to present our findings on the trading platform vulnerability, the disaster struck. Mike was sharing his screen to show some network flow diagrams, but he must have had multiple windows open. For a split second, as he fumbled to close a pop-up, I saw it. A snippet of a private chat window between him and an external email address, referencing delivery successful and mentioning Alex's access logs. My blood ran cold. It was a fleeting glimpse, and Mike quickly closed whatever it was. He flashed a nervous smile, but the damage was done. He probably thought I hadn't seen it, or that I'd dismiss it as a random message. But in that instant, the carefully constructed world of my work friendships, my professional trust, and my understanding of Mike's helpfulness imploded. The ground shifted beneath my feet. The implications began to dawn on me, slow and terrifying. They help with my credentials, they streamlined access. The requests for personal email transfers, the convenient glitches, were they all part of a plan? Was Mike not my friend, but my adversary, subtly setting me up for a fall? The logical part of my brain, the one that thrives on order and evidence, began to kick into high gear, while the emotional part was paralyzed by disbelief and a deep, chilling sense of betrayal. Update 1. The glimpse of that chat window on Mike's screen was like a flashbang, momentarily blinding me before the smoke cleared and I was left staring at the stark reality of what I'd glimpsed. Alex's access logs, delivery successful, phrases that struck like hammer blows against the foundation of my trust. The man who'd shared countless lunches, late nights, and even a few beer-fueled commiserations with me wasn't my ally. He was a threat, and he was using my own digital identity as his weapon. The immediate aftermath was a cold, sharp clarity. My mind, trained for this kind of forensic thinking, kicked into gear. The paranoia I'd been fighting off was, it turned out, a very real threat assessment. I couldn't afford to be wrong, and I couldn't afford to be right without proof. First, I went back to my own logs. I pulled up my access history for the past 2 months, the period when the major data leaks began. I meticulously cross-referenced my login times, my file access patterns, my VPN connections against the company's security reports. Everything on my end was clean. No unauthorized access, no suspicious file transfers originating from my workstation outside of work hours. This was crucial. If Mike had tampered with my credentials or rerouted my activity, there would be digital footprints. I started taking screenshots of my own audit trails, saving them to an encrypted drive I kept separate from the company network. Then, I focused on the shared drive activity logs. Mike's help with streamlining my processes suddenly looked much more sinister. I searched for activity related to the trading platform audit and the client data migration. There it was, multiple instances where files I'd worked on were accessed or modified by accounts associated with Mike's employee ID, often minutes after I'd saved them, or at odd hours when I was logged off. He'd even accessed a backup I'd made of my sensitive personal analysis reports, the ones I'd saved to my encrypted drive on my work machine, thinking it was just for safekeeping. His time-stamped entry into that folder, just hours after I'd put it there, was chilling. It confirmed he wasn't just observing. He was actively accessing and potentially copying or altering my work. Recalling Mike's requests for me to email him files directly to his personal Gmail, I realized the motive: bypass corporate audit trails. I couldn't access his personal email, of course, but I could check my own sent items. I found a string of emails where he'd asked for specific data sets, always framing it as a quick handover to expedite a client request or finalize an audit report. These emails were now damning evidence of his systematic data exfiltration. The external email address from the chat, I couldn't identify it directly without resorting to illegal surveillance, which was out of the question. But the phrase Alex's access logs was enough. It meant he was reporting on my activity. He wasn't just stealing my work. He was documenting my actions, likely to create a narrative that I was the one compromising security. I knew I couldn't handle this alone, not without risking being dismissed as paranoid. I thought about who I could trust. My direct manager, Sarah, seemed decent but was notoriously conflict averse. HR, too risky without undeniable proof. I decided to reach out to Dr. Evelyn Reed, a former cybersecurity professor of mine. She was now a consultant and an expert witness in digital forensics cases. I sent her a carefully worded, anonymized request for advice. Her reply was swift and professional. Alex, what you're describing is a classic social engineering and insider threat scenario. Document everything rigorously. Time, date, source, file names, relevant system logs. If you suspect tampering, try to get forensic copies of file metadata, not just the files themselves. Avoid confronting the suspect directly until you have a solid case, as it could tip them off or be used against you. Do not use company resources for your investigation unless absolutely necessary and clearly documented as part of your own security work. She also recommended I secure all my personal copies of work data on a separate, encrypted external drive. Following her advice, I spent my evenings compiling. My personal encrypted drive became my secure vault. I created a master document, a chronological timeline of every suspicious event, Mike's requests for my files, the altered permissions, the missing client data, his opportune warnings about my methods, the chat glimpse, and the specific timestamps from my own logs and the shared drive's audit trail. I cross-referenced everything. Then, the situation escalated from suspicious to actively hostile. A week after the chat incident, I received an automated security alert from IT. Suspicious activity detected on your workstation. It flagged a supposed unauthorized attempt to access client financial data from my login, originating from my IP address, at 2 a.m. one night. I hadn't been near my work computer then. My heart hammered. Mike had done it. He'd planted something or manipulated logs to make it look like I was the rogue element. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but the meticulous work of the past few days kicked in. I knew I'd be called in by security. I immediately contacted Dr. Reed. She advised me to cooperate fully but to be precise and factual. Assert that your workstation was secured and logged off at that time, and request the full forensic report on the alert, including source IP and detailed process logs. They'll need to trace it back. If Mike planted it, his actions will be visible to a competent forensic analyst. I was called in by Sterling's head of IT security the next morning. He was polite but stern, laying out the evidence of my supposed breach. I calmly presented my own findings, starting with the fact that my workstation had been powered off and secured at 10 p.m. the previous night, and presented my secured logs from the IT department's own system showing this. I then requested a forensic analysis of the alert itself, pointing out the possibility of compromised credentials or external manipulation. His expression shifted from suspicion to intrigue as I laid out my timeline of Mike's activities and the external chat mention. He agreed to a full internal investigation. The game was afoot. I had built my case, brick by digital brick. But now, I was playing against someone who knew my systems, my habits, and who had already shown he wasn't afraid to cross every line. The feeling wasn't just fear anymore. It was the stark realization that my career, and potentially my freedom, were on the line. Final update. It's been nearly a year since the whole ordeal with Mike. A year since the cold certainty set in, since the betrayal unraveled years of trust, and since I found myself at the center of a corporate storm I never wanted to be a part of. The official investigation concluded swiftly after Mike was fired, and the forensic reports confirmed my findings. Sterling Financial issued a statement about maintaining rigorous security protocols and employee integrity, and then, as companies do, moved on. But for me, moving on was less about forgetting and more about learning to navigate the new landscape my life had become. Professionally, things settled into a strange new normal. I received that promotion, a clear acknowledgement of my diligence and integrity. Sarah, my manager, was genuinely supportive, ensuring I had the resources I needed to feel secure and valued. But the office itself felt different. The easy camaraderie I'd shared with colleagues, the casual camaraderie born from shared projects and late nights, was subtly altered. Some people treated me with a newfound respect, others with a wariness I couldn't quite decipher. I suspect many just wanted to avoid getting caught in any similar drama. I found myself more guarded, less likely to share personal anecdotes or vent about work frustrations. Every interaction was filtered through the lens of what I now knew was possible, that beneath the surface of professionalism, unseen currents of ambition and deception could be at play. My vigilance, once confined to network perimeters, had expanded to encompass human interaction. I double-checked everything, meticulously documented my own work, and became adept at creating secure backups for even the most mundane files. It wasn't paranoia, exactly. It was a hard one, an exhausting sense of self-preservation. The emotional fallout was more profound. The betrayal by someone I'd considered a friend shook me to my core. It wasn't just about the stolen work or the attempted framing. It was the realization that years of shared experiences could be built on such a warped foundation. I questioned my own judgment. How could I have been so blind? So trusting? My ability to assess people's intentions, once a source of quiet confidence, felt compromised. I found myself scrutinizing colleagues' behavior, wondering what secrets lay hidden behind their smiles and professional courtesy. The easy trust one once extended so freely became a guarded commodity. I sought professional help. Talking to a therapist, recommended by my friend Marta, was instrumental. She helped me unpack the trauma of betrayal, the feelings of violation, and the impact on my self-esteem. We worked on understanding the manipulation tactics Mike had employed, the gaslighting, the isolation, the subtle undermining, and how they preyed on my desire to be a good colleague and my inherent trust in others. She helped me reframe my vigilance not as a flaw, but as a necessary adaptation. She also helped me process the grief of losing a friendship and the subsequent erosion of my faith in collegial bonds. It was a slow, arduous process, but gradually, I began to untangle the emotional knots. The experience fundamentally reshaped my perspective on work and relationships. I realized that genuine mentorship is rare and invaluable, and that those who offer it freely and transparently are the ones to cherish. Conversely, those who hoard information, isolate you, or take credit for your work are not allies, but threats. I learned to look beyond surface charisma, to value demonstrable actions and verifiable results over flattering words. My professional interactions became more formal, more focused on clear deliverables and objective data, which, in a way, aligned perfectly with my own analytical nature. Mike vanished from the tech world shortly after his dismissal. I heard through industry contacts that he'd surfaced at another company, but it wasn't long before similar whispers of misconduct followed him. It offered no real satisfaction, only a confirmation that his behavior was a pattern, not an isolated incident. Looking back, the ordeal was a brutal education. It stripped away my youthful idealism, replacing it with a healthy, if sometimes weary, skepticism. I'm not the same person who walked into Sterling Financial 2 years ago. I'm more cautious, more observant, and far more aware of the potential for deceit, even in seemingly safe environments. But I also discovered a resilience I didn't know I possessed. I learned to trust my instincts, to document everything, and to rely on my own skills and integrity when challenged. My career at Sterling continues. I'm good at what I do, and I've proven my worth through my actions, not just my words. I've built stronger, more genuine connections with a few trusted colleagues, people who, like Leo, value transparency and integrity. The scars remain, a reminder of what happened and why vigilance is a necessary part of my toolkit. It's a lonely feeling, sometimes, to know that the world isn't always as straightforward as a well-structured code, but it's a necessary one. I carry the lessons learned, not as a burden, but as a shield, and I move forward, a little more weathered, a little wiser, and infinitely more aware of the unseen vulnerabilities all around us.